Hello, my name is Dr. Amy Martell, and I'm a curriculum consultant here at IU17. Today, we're going to take a dive into student vital actions, creating a classroom culture. We're specifically talking about a mathematics classroom, and this could be from primary all the way up through to grade 12. Moving on to our first slide, I want to provide for you my contact information in case you had further questions. We're going to be putting this together as a way to help teachers to make those small shifts in practice to have a great effect in that instructional environment. We're going to try to look at some different strategic interventions or strategies that teachers can do in their classroom that would foster student vital actions. The outcomes would be to describe the importance of the math practice standards, to understand those connections between creating a class culture that would support instructional environments where student vital actions are frequently observed, and then to learn those strategies that would guide teachers to embed those student vital action opportunities within their classrooms. Before we get started, I want to just note that the Pennsylvania Department of Education has on their website, which the link is on the page there, a whole list of student and teacher resources that may be helpful. This is not an exhaustive list on my screen, but once you go to the website, you'll see even more. My first question for you to just reflect on is, how familiar are you right now with the PA core mathematic practices? Do you know what the math practices are? Can you name them? Do you know how many there are? Do you know what they would look like in the classroom? Some of the specific instructional strategies we're going to be talking about today that teachers could use, a lot of the researchers are calling these instructional moves that would support that classroom culture where student vital actions would be present. These are a list of the different strategies that we're going to be exploring within this webinar. We found out from the research from Further, Crewman, Stair in 2015 that classroom questions in math are the best used experimental teaching and learning tool to facilitate student academic involvement and to be able to judge student critical thinking. So to reiterate that, it's gonna be vitally important for us to really take a look at our questioning in a math classroom to understand the complexities of it, because the research is telling us that this is critically important to student academic improvement. We also found out through the research that math teachers would need to have an awareness of the different types of questions and approaches to the art of questioning in order to strengthen students' understanding and in a math classroom. It's been very important lately in the past few years to really focus on higher order thinking skills, and I would say critically important in a math classroom. But we are specifically looking at problem solving, critical thinking, and reasoning, and those must be reflected in the math pedagogy in order to foster student abilities to engage in mathematical reasoning. So it's going to be important for students to be active participants in the learning process, and questioning techniques can be helpful for encouraging, and they also can be helpful for promoting student reasoning ability. And that's according to the research from Van Zee and Minstrel. But research on questioning in math classrooms indicated that 93% of teachers are low level, what they call low level knowledge-based questions, and they focus primarily on the recall of facts. So it's interesting to think about if that 93% of the teacher questions might be lower level, if then student performance in math may be affected by that lower level of questioning. So it's important for us to make sure that teachers have adequate subject knowledge and are able to really use those questioning strategies, like, for example, starter questions, questioning to encourage mathematical thinking. They're going to be proficient in assessment questioning and discussion questioning, and questioning that might engage students in mathematical conversations. It's going to be critically important as well for teachers to have the knowledge and expertise on how to scaffold those questions to support learning for all students. The summary of the relevant research on questioning indicated that there's a dualistic system with math questioning. So two general types of teacher types of questions. which I already discussed as the low level and the high level. But the low level questions are known as closed questions, direct questions, knowledge and recall questions. They do have a place in the classroom, but the proportion of 93% of the questioning really can't be on these low level questions. The high level questions, on the other hand, would be more open ended. They would be more interpretive, evaluative. They'll be probing. They'll be inferential. They'll be emerging and synthesis based. And it's going to require usually a significant or definitely some wait time for the responses from the students. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some strategies that we can use in our classroom to help facilitate this. So let's jump right into the first teacher move that has been discussed, called talk to the class. I brought up here for you 100 questions for mathematical discourse from, I think it was gettingsmart.com. The way these strategies are going to be presented is we're going to talk about what the problem is, what the move is, and then the teacher tip. Okay, so you can see on the screen, the problem is that the students may be accustomed to direct answers to the teacher, and often they don't speak loudly enough for their classmates or everyone in the room to hear, especially in an online environment, especially when we now may have masks over our faces. Now in an environment where we may have a box on our desk where we're, not able to, you've seen those boxes with the window in the front and the cardboard on the side. It's really difficult to hear. So one of the strategies which we could employ right away would be making sure that students are not addressing the teacher, that they are addressing the other students in the classroom. It makes sense. It makes sense because we probably learned in our early teaching that when we're asking a student a question and we're in close proximity, one of the strategies that we would use would be that we would move away from that student so that the student would speak more loudly, and then other students would be able to hear the response. So this would be really just another way of enhancing that, making sure that when the students are answering, that they're answering to their peer group, not to the teacher. Remember that it can take time to develop a classroom culture where students readily share their thinking, listen to others, provide constructive critique, and continually revise their way of thinking. The teacher tip suggests that you can check with a student far away from the speaker whether they were able to hear what the speaker said. You might also consider having students stand and face other students when they are explaining their thinking. Some teachers say stand tall protocol to gently remind students to stand and talk to their peers. Don't be surprised if you have to repeat that phrase many, many times. When students are thinking about their explanation, they can easily forget to stand and face the class, or they may hesitate to take the risk lest they get caught not knowing. You don't necessarily even have to have them stand, but you would need to have them turn and address the classroom. When you have an online environment, this is a unique situation where they're addressing peers that may not actually be in the room physically. You can ask a student that's farther away, you can say, or even someone that's sitting in a remote environment, you could say simply, could you repeat what the first student said? And you could have them just repeat. You could have them explain if they agree or disagree with what the first student said. If they said that they agree, then you would probably ask them, what strategy did you use? You might ask them, why do you agree? If they say they disagree, you might ask them, why did you disagree? You could have the second student share your method, if it's a different method, with the entire class. You could ask the second student, what part did you understand? You could ask that second person to share with a third person in the classroom something from the original answer. So it's just different strategies for teachers to use with the questioning to make sure that we are making sense of, what's being said. So recap, you can restate the first explanation. You can ask them if they agree or disagree, but definitely always ask why. Do they disagree or do they agree? You can stop and ask after the first student answers, and you ask that first student, not just for the answer, but why. You could ask the first student if he or she could convince the rest of us that that makes sense. You could ask the class what they think about what the first student said. You could ask if anyone else would like to add to the explanation that the first student gave. There's a lot of ways that you can really engage the class in those questions when you want to take a deeper dive into the questioning strategies. You could ask if anyone had a different answer. You might even think of asking if they could help another student without telling the answer. If you had to help another student solve this problem without telling the answer, what would you tell that student to do? You might ask that student to explain to someone who missed class today how to solve that problem. You might ask a second student if that was a reasonable answer, or you might ask the first student how he or she reached the conclusion. In conclusion, I'd ask you to go to our evaluation and to fill out. And thank you for participating in today's educational opportunity or training. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.